We hear this all the time.
There are so many updates and tons of community work happening. It's hard to keep up. How do I follow it all?
Here is your answer. Listen to the Gutenberg Changelog. Hello and welcome everyone to our 24th episode of the Gutenberg Changelog. In today's episode, we'll talk about the earlier release of Gutenberg 8.5, approaching the release of WordPress 5.5, the JavaScript for WordPress conference, and the blog directory, and many, many more things. I'm Birgit Pauli-Haar, curator of the Gutenberg Times, and I'm here with my co-host, Mark Urain, designer at Automatic and core contributor to WordPress. So this has been a crazy busy week for me, and I learned a ton about plugin development and scaffolding modern JavaScript. That's a win in my book. So how have you been, Mark?
I've been well. It has been a busy week. I will agree with you there. I'm excited about the new WordPress release that's coming out very shortly here, which we'll get to in a bit. And yeah, I agree with you, Birgit. Just been busy. A lot of stuff, a lot of information flowing through right now.
Yeah, I did a lot of reading. So as an announcement, the JavaScript for WordPress conference has come and gone. And after 16 awesome talks on Gutenberg, WordPress, and headless CMS. And you can catch the recordings on Groudcast until they're available on Zach Gordon's website, javascript4wp.com. The Gutenberg blog building talks were great. I was only able to listen for a short period of time before I had to get back to work, but I want to give a shout out to the speakers and to put them in your memory so you can come back and watch the videos. Chandrika Guntur talked about converting short codes to Gutenberg blocks, a task many of us are looking forward to. Justin Anon, sorry, I'm butchering his last name. Sorry, Justin. He showed how to take advantage of the Gutenberg reusable blocks. Tony Alavi talked about the data visualization with Gutenberg.
What?
Whoa, yeah.
I miss these talks, Birgit. So I cannot wait to watch some of these.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Mario Santos had a case study connecting Gutenberg and Frontity framework. And then Kinder Köhler wants you to turn and face the strange and talk about making the transition to Gutenberg. And Diane Wallace talked about building custom components for Gutenberg. And I just caught a few minutes of hers as well, and that was really excellent.
Kinda's talk, that's pretty clever. Face the strange. I like that one.
Yeah. So my talk was on Thursday, and it was an exploration of the great Create block scaffolding tool that's built into Gutenberg plugin, and how it relates to getting single block plugins into the block directory that will be available with WordPress 5.5. And I'll share the slide deck in the show notes if you're interested.
I just want to say that talk, Birgit, is very timely right now. So with 5.5 coming out, and I think you and I talked earlier about how there's really not a lot of documentation on this. So if you're interested in getting your plugins into the single block plugin directory, watch Birgit's talk there with some of that, how to do that.
Although it's all a work in progress, you're right. The documentation as well as the block plugin validator that Alex Shields is working on is also a work in progress, but you can already check it out. And I have some links in the slide deck, and I will add them also to the show notes here, so you can get yourself acquainted with it. So chapeau to Zach Gordon, who put a fantastic conference together. This were only 6 of 16 talks. He did a fantastic job also to make the speaker roster diverse and inclusive. And it takes a lot of work. So I'm glad he took the time and the effort to make that work so well. And he had some great MCs, Mary Job from the community team and from Uganda. And then Fabian Kegi, who is a friend of Gutenberg Times. He was also an MC on the conference. So great team, well done. And I'm looking forward to the 4th annual JavaScript for WordPress conference in 2021. Speaking of the blog directory, we are working on a live Q&A, and it will take place on August 6th at 7 p.m. Eastern 23 UTC, which is a little bit late for our European friends, but we need to kind of do an odd thing because Alex Shields is going to come and he's in Australia. Alex Shields and Kelly Dawn both worked on the block directory feverishly to get it into beta release. So they only have to fix the bugs later, but the to 5.5 feature freeze was on July 7th. So a lot of things needed to be done by then. That's why documentation and other things are a little bit to the wayside right now. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Gutenberg Times at any time, and you will notify it as soon as we go live with our next show. So that was from the announcements.
Yeah, Birgit, I'm so glad that you do those Q&As because that is just such a valuable time of information that is conveyed to the rest of WordPress users. And it's like, if you're interested in that stuff, right? Like this is a perfect opportunity to really just listen in to hear what these people who are building the product are doing.
Well, thank you, Mark.
So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for mentioning it. They're a lot of fun. And to our listeners, if you have an idea of what we should do on those live Q&As and have an idea who should come on, I'm open for suggestions and ideas. Yeah.
So we have community contributions now. We're going to talk about a couple here, Birgit. First one that we noted was Munir Kamal published his Editor Plus plugin. And that basically extends the core blocks with a ton of additional settings and options. He calls it the no-code visual style editor. We have a link in the show notes, but it includes things like a background for individual columns, box shadow, margin, and padding. On the Gutenberg team, we're always hearing the desire for these other features to be baked in. And here's a plugin that's really, really addressing those needs of the users out there. So Munir, this is great. Great work.
Yeah. Can you say gradients one more time? Yeah. Background for the and the background for the individual columns actually also includes images, not only color or gradients, but also images. Really cool. I find many settings on the block sidebar quite anxiety inducing, and I know I will spend a lot of time just checking them out. So I have mixed feelings about all these options that are kind of I'm bombarded with, because I feel maybe if I'm not looking at them, I'm missing out on cool stuff. But the border radius on columns is really cool.
It really is, yeah. I totally agree with you there. And as if that wasn't enough, we're looking at ways right now on Gutenberg itself to really like advance the actual block toolbar and ways to fit things in there more. And there's a lot of neat experimentation that's going on around.
That's great. I'm looking forward to seeing this. Yeah. So another plugin that came about, it's in its update, is the Weston Rudders syntax highlighting code block. And he writes, this plugin extends the code block in WordPress core and adds syntax highlighting, which is rendered actually from the server. So pre-existing code blocks on the site are automatically extended to include syntax highlighting, and doing server-side syntax highlighting eliminates the need for enqueuing any JavaScript on the front end, like Highlight.js or Prisma.js. And this makes it not only quite fast, but also AMP safe. And just in case you don't know, Weston Rudder works for Google on the AMP plugin for WordPress, so he would know.
He's kind of an expert there.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. The plugin update includes line highlighting, so you can determine which lines are actually highlighted in the block.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have a choice of programming languages, and you can show line numbers or wrap lines and all through the block setting. It's quite extensive. So if you have a developer blog where you share your learnings, you get some nice tools with that.
That's very valuable. Yeah. I know sharing code on blogs and articles that are written, it's just so nice when it's like syntax highlighted, numbers, like it, just reading it is enjoyable.
Yeah, it feels like your own code in your editor in IDE. Yeah. And I must say, a lot of documentation that we have on the GitHub or in the tutorials is lacking a few code examples, that kind of gets you started and to think about that, and then the explanations later on. So I think I'm going to to team up with Mark, who has been working diligently on getting tutorials ready. He also worked on the create block documentation that will come into the tutorial quite soon. Yeah, so
I think that documentation got in, right?
Yeah, you will have it in your list there. Yeah. Speaking of gotten in, what was released, WordPress 5.5 Beta 1 is out. It was released on July 7th. Please go out and test it. There is a beta test plugin out there so you can download that to a test site, but take your live site into a staging environment.
Yeah, don't test it on your live sites in your production.
The release candidate you might be able to test on the live site, but it's also a big release and it touches all corners of WordPress. So make sure you are not getting blindsided by any of those updates. And of course, no one wants to break anything. So, but it's known to happen. And the more people, what is the saying? The more people are in there, all bugs are shallow. Yeah, so that's kind of that. That's my shout out for WordPress 5.5.
And that then takes us to Gutenberg 8.5 and 8.5.1 that have been released. There are about 140 change items in this release.
Amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
Goodness, I didn't think there would be that many in this one because I figured this was just like, let's get the last few things in, ready for 5.5. But here we are with a list of very impressive changes that have happened. So all changes on this plugin will make it into WordPress 5.5, except for the experimental parts, of course, like full site editing, navigation screens and blocks and widgets, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to be included in 5.5, but there's so many other things that are coming in with block editor for 5.5 that it's kind of a relief not to have all this stuff pushed into one release for core. But there were two major features in 8.5. One was for accessibility. Add an option to keep the caret inside blocks in the edit mode. And number two was adding an anchor or ID support to all static blocks. And that sounds kind of technical, but it's a big deal. There's been a lot of requests for this. Now you can add links to parts of a post, no matter which form it took. It can be a paragraph or an image or a quote or anything really. This opens up the content for additional functionality, like a native table of contents or a citation down to a paragraph that was cited. At the moment, it only works with the static blocks, which have built-in front-end rendering. So it's in the works for dynamic blocks. So keep an eye out for it for dynamic blocks, but it's there. A lot of people are digging that. So
yeah, I read the issue when it was kind of introduced to that, and a lot of people were trying to add those anchor links into the HTML, and then the block parser kind of kicked them out again, and it was a never-ending cycle of kind of while they had to use the custom HTML block because just use HTML wouldn't work for someone. Yeah, so a lot of frustrated users out there that are now getting that in. So it's really cool.
That is. There were, in the changelog, there were 34 enhancements in this version. I'm going to come through a good number of these because they're all so fun to read through. There was add an edit button to the gallery images, so you can actually edit individual gallery images. The image block allows uploading external images if the image host allows it.
Yes.
So Birgit, I know you love this one.
Yeah,
you explain it to us. Explain this one. What happened?
So what happened to me was that we did on the documentation team, we had new contributors and said, well, write and on Google Docs and add your screenshots to it. And then we copy pasted into the site. And what happened was that we were not able to get the images over because they're still linking to the Google documentation. So you don't want the pictures to go mad or 404 when somebody just deletes the Google Doc because they were done with it. So I think I advocated for it in all corners of people who have anything to say. And then Ella was so graceful to say, oh, I put it into WordPress 5.5 and I will work on it. It didn't get as far as she wanted, but this is fine for me. What it does is you copy paste something over from Google Docs, and then the image comes over, and then you see on the image block a little button that says download the image or get the image as well. And then it automatically goes out, gets the image, and puts it in your media library. So that's fantastic. Thank you, Ella Van Dorp.
I know, yeah. That's a lifesaver, right? I love a little bit as well.
And yeah, we do a lot of writing in Google Docs, so that's definitely a saver when we do publish things. Yeah.
There were also a lot of drag and drop improvements. You had some enabling for multi-selection, improving the drag and scroll behavior. Pretty cool if you're dragging up towards the top or towards the bottom of the screen and it's a long document, the scroll behavior will move faster for you and slow down as you move away from the edge of the screen.
That's good.
Yeah.
Because I never got to the point where I could scroll it up there. Yeah.
There's don't show a cloned block while dragging. I love this because I would always get like confused seeing the block that I'm trying to drag, but also seeing it still in place. And so it would clone the block. You'd see the block in two different areas and it just kind of was confusing for a long time. That has been fixed. And actually when you go to drag a block now, it kind of like minimizes into this little chip, this little black thing that you can kind of easily drag around the page and drop it wherever you want, which I love. There are a lot of image editing enhancements, like moving zoom control to the toolbar drop down, adding original aspect to drop down. So now the toolbar for image blocks, when you click the crop tool or the edit tool, there's a lot of different editing variations or cropping variations that you could do. And all these are kind of now getting grouped together. And I'm actually working on an issue right now to even refine that further. So it's really nice.
But I can also see that that takes a lot of work and a lot of iteration to get it right, with the expectations that our users have. Can I do this? Can I do that?
Yeah, all the developers and designers who have already put in the time to make this happen, like kudos to them because it's fantastic that we have these controls now.
Yeah, I love them.
Let's see, there's of course the block directory. There's few changes there, like use the CDN for block directory assets. Polishing the document sidebar controls. That was one that recently got in, and just really tightening up a lot of the sidebar controls. You know how, Birgit, you were saying sometimes it can cause you a little anxiety? Well, just by adding a little polish here, it kind of helps visually. There is adding the modern WP admin color scheme support. So if anybody's watching in Track, there is a new color scheme that got merged in for your WP admin called Modern. And Gutenberg also now adds support for that color scheme to translate into the editor as well.
Oh, that's awesome. So that's a little feature that kind of got snuck into the big WordPress 5.5 and we only surfaced it here. Yeah, it's interesting. There
was redesigning the transform menu. So that basically used to be a grid of blocks when you'd open up from the block transform tool. Now it's a list, which is a lot easier to kind of scan through and see what's going on. They redesigned the canvas inserter. So, you know, when you roll over between the blocks, you get like a little plus button. When you click that, the inserter that pops up right there is redesigned, and there's just shows like the latest blocks or the most recent blocks that you used or something. And then there's a browse all button as part of that insert.
Yes, I saw that. That's much cleaner, yes.
Yeah. There's add block variations to the slash inserter, which is kind of cool. So if you're just using the / to search for your block, now you have block variations in there as well. Add reusable block tab to the inserter. So when you click
big deal.
Yeah, and you get that, now it's like a panel, the inserter, right? So we used to have blocks and patterns. Now we have blocks, patterns, and reusable blocks. So it's kind of a really good way to see your reusable blocks in a spot that you can add to your document. Yeah,
they were all lost on the bottom of the screen. Yeah, you had to scroll through all the blocks that you had, from the plugins to the core, to get to reusable blocks. And
then we have add keyboard shortcuts for moving blocks. So you can move blocks around with keyboard shortcuts. Making preview and save draft buttons use the same style. So you'll notice, as with all the other UI redesign that happened in Gutenberg, that the save, draft, and preview buttons now are looking very similar. So it's like just some nice little tightening up. Another one, adding unlink URL to button blocks, the buttons block. So if you ever wanted to, when you added a link, now you can unlink it.
That's good. Otherwise, you only could replace it.
Yeah, you had to like delete the button, right? And then start over again.
Yeah.
And the last one here under announcements that I have is clean the patterns list to include in core. So what that meant is that we spent some time, some designers and developers kind of spent some time going through the list of patterns and kind of cleaning, refreshing that list a bit so we can make sure that the patterns that are going into core are the patterns that we want and think that people will use.
The block patterns are the first time in core, so it's going to be really interesting with the block patterns, the block directory, the reusable block surface. There's a lot of good new features in there for the block editor, apart from the cleaned up UI. But also in the new, in 8.5 was new APIs went in there. And only 5 new APIs, and I'm highlighting 3 of them. There was a stabilize the image editing REST API endpoints. So you can use those also in your own blocks and also server side if you need to. And then you can, and that stabilize also the block directory REST API endpoints for the block directory coming into core. The new APIs also include adding descriptions to block patterns. Yeah, so you can tell people what they do with the block patterns.
Right, sometimes the title of the block pattern isn't really enough to tell like maybe a screen reader what that block actually does, right?
That's right, the block pattern tab, it has a visual of how the block pattern's gonna look, but of course, if you are visually impaired, you don't see it that well. So it definitely helps. The experiments that the team has been working on is the full site editing experience, a site building experience, so to speak, and has a few enhancements and fixes. It definitely improved the template parts insertion flow, which was kind of tested, and there were some changes made. And add the template part block keyword to the block searches. So that helps as well. And then there were some changes on the navigation screen and the navigation block. One of them was specifically for accessibility, improve keyword navigation on the navigation block toolbar. That is big. Another one was hide the block toolbar on the navigation screen. That was a little clunky when you wanted to put menus or menu items there. You also get the block toolbar there, and it was kind of covering things up. So that's really good. And then allow setting up menus that auto add new pages. That makes the navigation screen feature par with what's possible now. You can do that in a customizer, yes. And the last item here is to also allow the search block to be added alongside the links into the navigation bar. A lot of sites do that, but it's now relatively hard to do or impossible without some development access to the theme. So this is definitely a great.
Yeah, now I think we just need to tighten up that search block a little bit so that it works nicely in the navigation block.
Yeah. Depends on how much space it takes, yeah.
Right. And that takes us to bug fixes. There were about 33 of those in this changelog. Several of them had to do with the block directory. As everybody knows, that's a new feature, so working out the kinks there still. There was fixing the horizontal block mover layout, which is a cool one. Fixing invisible drop target indicator. So if you're dragging and dropping blocks around and you kind of need to, there was a little bug there. So that's.
So the fix was to make them visible, right?
Fix invisible drop target.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, make them visible.
Let's see, the classic block had several bug fixes, which is great because that one was just kind of lingering there unattended for a while, I believe. So these bug fixes are really helpful.
Yeah, I'm glad that somebody tended to them. There still a lot of users that come over from the classic editor are still very much in love with the classic block. as a replacement.
Yeah, and I think I have highlighted one other, like don't show in the move to trash action if the user is not allowed to delete posts. So that kind of seems like an important one.
Yeah.
If you don't want that user to have permission to move to trash. We had one major performance improvement of the keyboard shortcuts binding, right? And then speaking of performance here, Birgit, we had nearly almost a 0.5 second loading time improvement from Gutenberg 8.4 to 8.5.
Awesome.
Not much of an improvement coming from 8.4 to 8.5 on the key press event, though, but still really good. Love seeing the performance improve all the time.
Yeah, but when I look at the table that is on the bottom of the release notes, if you ever want to look at it, there's quite some improvement between WordPress 5.4 and Gutenberg 8.5. So
Right.
I didn't do the calculations, but it's definitely a 25% improvement there on the key press event typing.
Mm-hmm. And we had about 12 documentation changes. These included things like adding a documentation page explaining how the repository is organized. So that one I think is super valuable for new users coming in, looking at the repository. There's another one about create a block tutorial. So adding that tutorial, which we kind of discussed earlier. Update categories in block registration documentation.
Mm-hmm.
So the categories, of course, got revised. We needed to update that in the documentation, and several other things as well, including typos and tweaks of all kinds.
And if you were looking for a documentation on the WP block styles, you will also find that in this release that they were updated or clarified. Code quality issues, with about 21 code quality issues in there. They seem to be minutiae, but sometimes they're really, really important because the little things make actually the word go round, right?
Yeah.
So one I wanted to point out is that they reduced the number of SAS color variables for the block editor, which cleans up code nicely.
Yes, love it.
And then there was the block directory. It removed the custom permission check and now uses the can user capabilities from core to make sure that only people who have permissions to actually install plugins can use the block directory, because that's what it does. It installs plugins in the background of things. So you need to have that. Yeah, and there was some things that removing unnecessary block directory dependency, cleaning up image editor rest routes, and fix end-to-end testing for the post-author block that I can see there. Which brings us then further to tooling, and that is even more thing that happened a lot in the background. It's about the continuing integration setup with Travis and GitHub, also about package management and improvement in the release tool and release documentation, and certain additional scripts were added, like the Terso plugin and exclude node models from source mapping and all this kind of thing. Good thing, good stuff, and run end-to-end tests. Which brings us to the various section of our release notes, and there were actually 5 items in there. One is that there now is a range control that integrates number control on the block editor. The create block tooling is now generating a block JSON file. If you don't know what that is actually streamlining the process or the block metadata in one file, so PHP as well as JavaScript are able to access it for the register block type functions. And there is no duplication anymore between those two layers, the server-side rendering and the client-side rendering of things.
Oh, wow.
And then they synced the block context changes from core, and then also synced the themes endpoint with the core's endpoints. That's for the full-site editing experience. And that's the end of our changelog run-through for Gutenberg 8.5.
And so now we have what's in active development. And we talked about WordPress 5.5 in beta 1 right now. And I just want to repeat that. Everybody, please go test this out. because it's a big deal. It's a big release and it touches all corners of WordPress. So make sure you're prepared for what's coming. I just wanted to reiterate that.
Yeah, good point.
There was a post recently, editor features for WordPress 5.5 update by Andre Dragonescu. And the release team is also working on dev notes for 5 new features for developers. And there's one on updating the default block categories, another one on introducing new API method that register block from block.json metadata file. There's one on introduce block context, another one support filtering arguments and block type registration, and finally a REST API one about exposing blocks registered on the server. We'll have links to those in the notes. And finally, there was also a
oh, that's just what we have here is the Excel spreadsheet that Justin, who is the wrangler of the developer notes for WordPress 5.5, has put together to see which track tickets actually need dev notes. So, and we only pulled the editor ones out there, but I think that's also good for developers to have in mind. There are also coming a lot of changes again to Gutenberg. For those who are listening who don't know what block context is that is introduced, is the idea that if it's a child block in a different block will behave differently than if it's on standalone. So the parent block can pass on props to the child block as well as styling and other options. So that's certainly something that developers are going to use. Yeah. All right. So we are at the end of the show.
Yay.
Yay. Yeah. Thank you, Mark. And thank you to the big Gutenberg team that has yet released another awesome Gutenberg version. At the end of the show, I just wanted to remind everyone, August 6th, 7 p.m. Eastern, 23 UTC, is the Gutenberg Times live Q&A about the block directory with the team members Alex Shields and Kelly Dawn from the Meta team working on that block directory. So Mark, do you have any last reminders or announcements? Or
I do not right now, Birgit. So yeah, I just thank you for joining me in this episode and to our listeners for listening in. But yeah, it's time to close this out.
All right. Well, listeners, you might have noticed we didn't have a review to read. This is your chance for our next episode. Send us a review or post a review to iTunes, and it will help to surface this awesome podcast higher into the suggestion box on iTunes and other blog podcast apps. As always, the show notes will be published on gutenbergtimes.com/podcast. This is episode 24. And if you have questions or suggestions or news you want us to include, send them to changelog@gutenbergtimes.com. That's via email to changelog@gutenbergtimes.com, or just ping me on Twitter in a DM. It's always open. So thanks for listening. Goodbye, and until the next time. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.